So what makes Warhammer so addicting? This is a question I've asked myself a lot when I first started and still do years later. Asking this question is only logical since Warhammer has such a commanding presence in the hobby sphere. It's one of those things a lot of people from the outside even ask when becoming interested in Warhammer. So why is this hobby we all know and love, hopefully, so damn addicting? Well, let's talk about it. But welcome back everyone, it's me the Warhammer complainy guy, Reverend/Handy, destroyer of wallets and maker of terrible financial decisions. Editing Handy here, everyone say hello to Chessie. So not only does your support help me, but now also Chessie, so cat toys and hopefully no surprise vet visits. Also yes, I'm a railroad nerd and chose the most milquetoast name for my cat. So don't forget to do all that good YouTube stuff like subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and super hyping it, and also hitting the bell because YouTube hasn't been notifying people when I upload. Along with maybe becoming a channel member too, because cat photos are now one of the perks for members. Oh yeah, and also Warhammer updates. But anyways, back to today's subject matter. Warhammer. Why is this game so damn addicting? And after much thought and some help from my stream co-host Ickolasbard, this is what we've come up with my thoughts first, secondly Ickolasbard's, then finally I'll be cross-examining all of it for a conclusion. So to me, the reason Warhammer is so addicting can be narrowed down to a few things. The first being the lore, except for when it's inconsistent and filled with retcons that make no sense. So aside from Star Wars, Marvel, and DC, what other sci-fi or fantasy IPs do you know of that have as much lore as Warhammer does? And I mean sheer amount of material reading, so novels and yes, even comic books. You can let me know in the comments down below, along with why you think Warhammer is so addicting. But a quick TLDR, there are 3 core pillars to the hobby that is Warhammer, those being the lore, the hobby, and the game itself. The lore is probably the most popular of the 3 pillars, because anyone can enjoy the lore, and what I mean by this is you don't have to spend a lot of money on books compared to minis unless you're chasing down the special edition novels. There are tons of lore videos even on YouTube for you to binge listen to if you can avoid the bad lore tubers. But the lore being so extensive is a huge reason as to why Warhammer is so addicting, because no matter which setting you choose that falls under the GW umbrella that you decide to dive into, there will always be what I like to call the core readings, or just the books everyone recommends someone to read. For example, Lion Son of the Forest, Infinite and the Divine, the Eisenhorn Omnibus, the Dark Imperium novels, and Saturnine to name a few. Some of the novels named are great introductions to Warhammer that make you want to know more. Old movie reference aside, the more of these good novels you read, the more you want to learn about the Warhammer universe, which turns out to be one of the addicting parts of Warhammer, the desire to know more about these vast settings spanning decades of lore, which can then lead into probably the most addicting part of Warhammer if you're in the hobby side, which is the minis. Now, aside from 3D printing, GW has arguably the best designed miniatures on the market currently. And when you start collecting an army, you always want to get the coolest miniatures for said army or armies, and GW has that in spades. Just going on the GW website, I guarantee you'll find at least a few minis that catch your fancy, and GW also knows how to play into human psychology when they do pre-orders for newer minis, also known as FOMO, because too many times has the new hot mini sold out within minutes on pre-order day, even though that's not what a pre-order is. But Warhammer miniatures are just so addicting to get that it's eventually what makes us come to our senses and realize we might have too many miniatures. That is, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford them in recent years. Thank you by the way everyone, because the channel now sustains the occasional stupid Warhammer purchase. Anyways, Warhammer minis are just so damn cool because for some reason the designs just speak to me and hit all the things that I think look cool, be it the design language of certain Space Marine chapters, real world equivalent examples, giant mechs, and just the color schemes, as Todd Howard would say.
It just works.
But you know what else works great for those minis you just bought? A carrying case from the sponsor of today's video, Tabletop Stronghold. If you play Warhammer or any other tabletop war games, do yourself a favor and get a Mag Case 2.0 to protect those expensive minis you just bought. Because no matter the size of your army, the Mag Case 2.0 comes in multiple sizes for any faction and also doubles as a display case. The Mag Case 2.0 is the perfect choice to protect your minis with its strong MDF construction, clear front display panel, and adjustable magnetic trays created by the all-powerful Magnet Wizard. You'll find that perfect mag case that suits your needs, like the Mag Case Mini for me, because it not only fits my Custodes and Dark Angels army, but it also fits my entire current Battletech collection. description. But if you want to help me help you, use my link in the pinned comment or description and use code CRAFT25 for 25% off your next order. So thank you Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video. If you want to get any mag case or case and terrain combo that ships to pretty much anywhere in the world for free, go to tabletopstronghold.com. So back to why Warhammer is so addicting. To me, the final reason as to why Warhammer is so addicting is the painting. Now I know I take a long time to paint my miniatures on stream and stop asking, but miniature painting to me is addicting in its own right, even if it's not Warhammer. Before I was doing YouTube and streaming, the speed at which I painted my minis was astronomically slower than the pace at which I can paint today. Kinda. But over the years, my painting skills have greatly improved, and with each mini I complete, I can see how each mini is an upgrade from the previous mini, like crisper highlights, better blending, better shading, improved freehanding, and attention to detail. Each project is like a time capsule for my journey as a miniature painter, and every mini that gets added to the display case is another completed project for the mountain of minis I've acquired over the years. So it just drives my motivation to complete even more minis, even if it's at a snail's pace. But this addicting nature can also lead to burnout if it gets taken too far and you don't paint at your own pace. I had that feeling before and it honestly sucks because then you don't have that drive to paint for your collection anymore. I love painting miniatures and always will. It's honestly the most rewarding part of this hobby. Nothing feels better than someone complimenting your paint job or even asking how you painted said mini. For me, this motivation to paint minis is what I feel like is the most addicting aspect of Warhammer. Because if I wasn't motivated to paint my minis at the pace that I choose to, and more specifically the ones that I want to paint, this addiction feels normal and an everyday part of my life. And now here's Ickolasbard with his reasoning for why Warhammer is so addicting.
Hello lads and ladies, it's Ickolasbard and I want to tell you about why I find Warhammer 40k so addictive. The first major thing that comes to my mind was the ambiguity in which the company encouraged the players to fill in the blanks with their own works. This is why we have 2 missing legions for Space Marines. They wanted a vacant spot so the player could claim they were survivors from these legions and mysterious successor chapters that they had no real origin. By the way, I'm willing to bet at least one of the forgeable chapters, like the Lamenters, the Astral Scorpions, I think that's what they're called, Carcharodons, those kinds of guys. I'm willing to bet one of them is actually Gene Seed from a missing legion instead of a Loyalist legion. Who knows? Another example is when they sunsetted the squats back in 2nd edition and gave all the players these various options on how you can incorporate them into your armies. This actually inspired me to make a squat Imperial Guard army in honor of that idea before the Votann were officially announced. We can see how fans love the vagueness and mystery due to how there was a consistent backlash against lore, which expanded upon the Grey Knight's Terminus decree, the Emperor delegating the creation of his Primarchs and Space Marines to characters who didn't exist until the Horus Heresy series, or how the Eldar had Wraithbone demystified. The second reason I find Warhammer 40k addicting is the fact that it is the only hobby that you can enjoy and talk about outside of the hobby. This is a fact that a good friend of mine had pointed out to me after a game of Warhammer. A lot of players would go eat food, take a walk, whatever, and they would talk about Warhammer. That's all they would talk about, Warhammer. People who do water polo don't talk about it when they're going out to the movies. Joggers aren't gushing over shoes while they're meeting for lunch, but Warhammer players love Warhammer even when there isn't any war to hammer. Third reason I find it so addictive is the drastically different art styles and themes, which gives a great sense of scale and variety that keeps things fresh. Let's use my big 3 armies. We have the Votann, the Celestial Lions, and the Imperial Guard. If you say Astra Militarum, you were born after 9/11, and I don't consider you a real person. The Votann have this Norwegian spacefaring theme with a prominent use of axes and pickaxes in their armaments. Their name Votann is a play on the name of Wotan, which is an aspect of the mythological god Odin in his form of wrath and revenge. Fun little tidbit about that, Wotan, Wotan's Day, Wednesday, that's the root origin from it. This is why we all hate Hump Day. Celestial Lions are golden-clad space marines with a strong African theme and built equally around nobility and brotherhood. They commonly use terms for ranks that are replaced from the normal structure, like an apothecary is a life binder, a chaplain is a death speaker, and so on. You can see a lot of this be used in the Spears of the Emperor, where they reference them, and additionally in some of the War for Armageddon books where Grimaldus, becomes a main character and does some really cool stuff for Celestial Lions. Great reads. And thirdly, the Imperial Guard. They are comprised of regiments and they themselves are distinct in their cultures, but I will highlight my favorite, which is the Valhallans. They are a regiment from an icy death world where their clothing barely saves them from freezing to death, and they use massive waves of infantry in Soviet-style clothing and weaponry to subdue the enemy. They're tougher and resilient due to their upbringing, and in older editions this was reflected in their regimental rules. Closest nowadays is the Siege Regiment and the Guard Codex, but it only truly scratches the surface. These are my big 3 reasons, and thank you for having me on again.
Thank you, Ickolasbard. Everyone go sub to Ickolasbard's channel for more Warhammer content. Now, based off of Ickolasbard's reasoning as to why Warhammer is so addicting compared to my reasoning, they're different, but there are some common themes and maybe some stuff I forgot to mention because, yeah, I don't like editing long videos. On the subject of ambiguity, when comparing it to what I said, it fits under the facet of the lore, since Warhammer is one giant universe romanticizing the mystification of sci-fi, with many different interesting lore tidbits that require you to think and fill in the blanks about certain events or armies in the setting, until GW decides to shoot themselves in the foot and piss everyone off. While his second and third point relate to my love of the miniatures and the hobby. For the hobby, ask yourself this: when you and your bros are hanging out, how often does Warhammer come up in a conversation, even if you're not talking about it? The answer is probably a lot, because you can talk about a lot of things like the lore, painting, the game, and many other things. Then in his third point about the different art styles and themes, this is one of the reasons why there will always be an army you'll find interesting, because something about them speaks to us, be it their design themes, lore, or real world history mashed into it. So in conclusion, the reason Warhammer is so addicting is that it blends reality into fiction into the lore and designs of various miniatures with real world equivalent themes and design languages we're all familiar with, while creating a hobby that you just can't help but fall in love with if we ignore the direction of the company, that will always be the subject matter of a conversation that comes up even if you think it won't, like painting and lore. But again, let me know in the comments down below why you think Warhammer is so addicting. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and a huge thank you to the Gigas of the Chads right here, the channel members and Twitch subscribers. So if you too want to be a Giga Chad and help fund these stupid ventures, consider becoming a member of either for access to the member section of the Discord and other things. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe along with Super Hype if you're on mobile, but I have to go make more terrible financial decisions. So I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, when you play Warhammer, being poor is a choice.